Hello, and welcome to my channel. Try this as a series breaking down a certain game or playstyle of a game. Today we're going to be talking Commander and breaking down Isshin, Two Heavens as One. The video is broken down into chapters which you can find in the description or in the timeline. I'll be briefly covering Isshin and then cover some win conditions and how we'll get there. I'll talk about some mana base and card draw strategies. I'll discuss other synergistic cards in the deck and why I think they'll help. I'll cover some other cards I cut from my example list, why they didn't fit my list but they might fit yours. And finally, I'll move on to some budget suggestions for the deck. If you enjoy this content, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. It really helps other viewers discover the content I produce and is a great way to show support. With that said, let's dive in. Isshin is a 3/4 human samurai that costs red, white, and black. He has, if a creature attacking would cause a trigger ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. I found Isshin to be a very aggressive commander who could easily assemble a scary board state and is surprisingly powerful. Throughout Magic's history, there are so many options in these colors that have attack triggers. It is important to note that he also doubles affects your opponent's trigger if you control it. This adds even more to the surplus of cards he can run. With so many cards available to him, this leaves Isshin to be a very versatile and flexible commander. I think this also makes him flexible with budget and power level also. Though I didn't build the example list as a budget build, attack triggers can literally be a dime a dozen as it's a common effect in Magic. You could probably go through all the chaff in your collection and find some options for him. We're going to win by abusing attack triggers and eventually beat down our opponents. There are several ways to generate or grow our creatures with attack triggers. We'll use a combination of these effects to eventually kill all our opponents. I'm adding one infinite combo with Aurelia and Helm of the Host. Basically, the Helm creates a fresh token at the start of combat of Aurelia, and that token gives us an extra combat. On that new combat, a fresh token is made again, doing the same until we win with flying creatures in the air. I felt this combo fit the theme and would be welcome if Isshin was removed too many times. Starting off is the auto includes in Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, and Thematic Compass. I've always found Thematic Compass to be a reliable card at any point in the game. It can help ensure land drops in early to mid game and flip into a strictly better Maze of It to protect us from Voltron commanders and other problem creatures. Gold Mirror and Ornithopter of Paradise are some early game mana dorks that are reliable in any deck and can propel us into more expensive cards. Likewise are classic cards in Wayfarer's Bubble and Mindstone. These two artifacts are reliable budget friendly cards that fit well in most decks. Burnished Heart and Solemn Simulacrum are two creatures that will fetch us some basics to field. As creatures, they can also play into some other cards I'll talk about later in the video. Dockside Extortionist and Smothering Tithe are two staples in Commander. They are a bit overkill in this deck, but are great includes that usually generate plenty of mana for us. Goldspan Dragon, Hoarding Ogre, and Captain Lannery Storm are some ramp creatures that synergize with our Commander. With Goldspan and the Captain having haste, we can instantly get value from them without relying on the other haste effects in the deck. To wrap up is Sword of the Animus, which is a great effect that can get doubled up by our Commander. I'm running 17 basics in this deck, so there should be plenty to grab with the sword. Being an equipment card, we can move it around or use it with Isshin to make it a reliable ramp card in this deck. Audacious Thief and Brina are two cards whose triggers get doubled up by our Commander. Brina will also give our opponents cards, but can incentivize them to attack each other instead of us. Brina will also give us cards while growing our creatures substantially, regardless if we're the ones drawing cards or our opponents. Battle Angels of Tyr can potentially draw us cards, ramp us, and gain us life. Myriad being an attack trigger will get doubled up by Isshin, making this a pretty reliable card. If not for these effects, then just as a solid flyer to beat down our opponents. Emberwild Captain will introduce Monarch into the game for potentially more card draw. Its ability will get doubled up by Isshin, which could really punish our opponents for attacking into us. Esper Sentinel and Archivist of Ogma are two new staples in Commander for card draw in white. With all the searching effects in Commander like ramp cards and tutors, Ogma should draw plenty of cards if it sticks around. Finally is Elderbrain, which is not a draw card specifically, but is a great card to provide card advantage. This card will deny a ton of value from your opponents while also expanding your hand into exile permanently. Like Evelyn, this card can be very powerful to shut down combo decks or steal win conditions. We can either use them ourselves or hold them in exile to keep them from our opponents. Normally the biggest downside of attack triggers is that you need to wait a turn to get their effect. Though some cards do have haste on them like Goldspan, so you can get it right away, but otherwise this is a huge setback in this deck. Without other ways to give our creatures haste, the deck could stall out, giving our opponents an opportunity to answer our threats before we get any value. Cards like Lightning Greaves and Swiftfoot Boots are some classics that can both protect our creatures while also giving them haste. Being equipment cards, they'll stick around through board wipes and can be moved to new creatures. Anger in the Graveyard and Fervor will also provide haste for our entire board. These two cards and the equipment cards are the only haste effects in my example list. There are more that we could add, but honestly I found Isshin to be a pretty aggressive deck without the extra haste cards. Okay, so there are a surprising amount of creatures that make other creatures on attack. Leonin Warleader and Hero Bladehold both make 2 normally and 4 with our commander. Bladehold's buff also gets doubled up and can be an incredible anthem with any of the token generators. Grave Titan and Mardu Ascendancy will both make more tokens on attack. With Mardu Ascendancy working with any non-token creature, it can make some explosive board states. Sky Knight Vanguard and Kazul will also make more tokens for us. Our opponents could pay for Kazul, but it's likely we'll make at least one since our commander also sees that trigger from our opponent's attacks. As I mentioned before, Myriad is actually really good with Isshin since it's an attack trigger. Blade of Selves and Legion Loyalty will generate a ton of attackers for us. This can be especially powerful while we still have all of our opponents to get extra copies of things. There are some just straight up powerful attack effects like Dracoseth and Atali that our commander can double up. Getting potentially 8 cards with Atali is insane value and can assemble a board state on its own. Rakshasa Debaser and Sun Titan are 2 cards that can reanimate some creatures for us. Sun Titan is a very flexible card that's welcome in this list. It can recur a ton of things like fetch lands and equipment cards that have been used or removed earlier in the game. Brutal Horde Chief and Campaign of Vengeance will be some effective ping effects in this deck. Neither care if the creature is a token, so we could potentially snowball this drain effect with cards like Leonin Warleader. Horde Chief can also protect our attacking creatures by allowing us to choose how our opponents block. This doubles as a removal effect, as we could force our opponents to chump block with their utility or combo creatures. Some blanket anthem effects are Fervent Charge and Gleam of Battle that Isshin will double up. These 2 cards can provide some explosive power spikes, turning our previously innocent board state into some huge threats instantly. Gleam of Battle is amazing as it anthems with counters, so the buff snowballs in the following combat steps. Finally, to wrap it up is Reconnaissance as an enchantment that can provide pseudo-vigilance and protect our utility creatures in combat. It really helps token generators like Leonin Warleader to also untap the tokens it creates. The cutting room floor is where I talk about some cards around or over $10 at the time of recording that I cut from my list for various reasons but are worth mentioning to run. Though these cards didn't find a home in my list, they might find a home in yours. First up is Iroas and Dullum Gate to protect our attacking creatures. Honestly, in my test games I wasn't having too much trouble saving my utility creatures. I always had some combination of cards that either anthemed my creatures to where they didn't need protection, or I could just swing tokens in the danger while the generators went somewhere else. I never ran to a situation where I thought to include these cards. It wasn't until writing the script that I realized I missed such obvious cards for this deck. Reconnaissance is already here for protection, but these are 2 solid cards that make sense with Isshin. Next is Bruce Tall, who can provide double strike and lifelink for some of our creatures. Isshin lets him buff 2 things on attack. There isn't a lot of life gain in this deck, so some would probably be welcome, and this creature's trigger makes it a versatile utility card to include. Ilharg is a great creature that can cheat out some other things from our hand. This is a powerful effect, but honestly my list doesn't run too many massive creatures to abuse it. Sure, I could potentially have Dracoseth or something else in hand, but the likelihood of having 2 creatures in hand that are huge is unlikely. Most of them I'd rather have out normally anyway to get the attack trigger. I'd much rather cast Atali or Rakshasa Debaser instead of sneaking them in. Though I think if you built an Isshin list with less utility creatures like I did, then Ilharg would probably be worth it. Mass Hysteria is another way to give all of our creatures haste, but it also gives our opponent's creatures haste. Though this card only costs 1 mana, I'd rather have the buff be one-sided, so I opted to include Fervor instead. If you feel like you need the deck to be more aggressive though, then this might be a good include for your list. First up is another haste effect in Hammer of Perforos. Isshin already felt like a very aggressive deck with the haste effects I had, so I decided I didn't need any more. I think if you needed to cut something for budget reasons like Goldspan Dragon, then this would be a good include. Parhelion 2 is a great meme vehicle that would be welcome in this deck as a budget include. I opted for Legion Loyalty as it can generate a ton of creatures swinging at everyone. However, Parhelion's tokens stick around and it is a massive power swing in the air. This makes it a solid budget card in this deck. Next up is Trepanation Blade, which not only mills your opponents to deny value, but can provide a potentially huge buff for something. I didn't discover this card into just finishing the script for this video, or it might have made it in the deck, but it's actually quite powerful with Isshin. As an equipment, it makes the buff very versatile and sticks around through most board wipes. Elturel Survivors and Duke Older are 2 more cards that would be welcome in an Isshin list. Though the Survivor's buff isn't an attack trigger, it having Myriad will make up for it with the extra copies. Duke Older will also provide haste and Myriad also. Curse of Opulence and Disturbance are two solid curses you could add to your list. Since you still control them, all the triggers get doubled up with Isshin. Though they provide double value for you, they also provide double value for your opponents, so keep that in mind. I didn't cover every card in this deck or every suggestion I have for Isshin, so if you'd like to see the rest, check out the deck list in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider clicking the like button and subscribing to the channel. Comment below on cards you think synergize well with this commander, and if you have any suggestions for commanders to build in the future. Thank you so much for watching, good luck, and have fun.